Joe Biden is a goddamn liar. There are multiple well-documented instances of Joe Biden publicly advocating for cuts to Social Security, Medicare, and other social safety net programs. There are at least 5 or 6 videos that I've personally seen of Joe Biden, whether it's him giving a speech somewhere, or whether it's him talking to reporters at a press conference, or even on the floor of the Senate. There's even one video, this one's one of my favorite videos, where he's on the floor of the Senate and he is irate and reading off a list of all the things that he's done, all the pieces of legislation that he's worked with these rabid far-right wingers in the Senate to try to cut Social Security and all the tricks and shit that they try to pull. He even talking about the one time or the multiple times he tried to completely freeze all government spending until cuts were made to these programs. One of the more recent and more egregious examples of Joe Biden trying to cut Social Security is when he was in the Obama administration, working as Obama's vice president. He helped devise this disgusting, what they called a, quote, grand bargain, where the Democrats were going to work with the Republicans to cut and privatize parts of Social Security to cut government spending. And this plan was well into fruition. It was very public. You can go look it up for yourself. And the only reason that thing did not come into law and those cuts to Social Security weren't made was because the lunatic, unprecedented cuts to Social Security that the Obama administration and Joe Biden were trying to make at the time, they wanted even more cuts to Social Security. So the only reason, the only thing that actually saved Social Security as we know it is the Republicans refusing to completely sign on to this because they wanted to gut Social Security more and faster than the Democrats wanted to at the time. But now that we're in the 2020 Democratic primary, Joe Biden's running for president, and the Sanders campaign is rightfully criticizing Joe Biden for his very public record of trying to cut Social Security and other social safety net programs. Now he's trying to rewrite history and gaslight everyone and pretend like that just never was his position. Pretend like the issue, one of the issues that Joe Biden has been the most consistent on throughout his career, try to pretend like none of that never happened and the Sanders campaign is just lying to make Joe Biden look bad. And it goes even further than him just saying that the Sanders campaign is lying. When people on Sanders' team posted a video of Joe Biden, video and audio of Joe Biden advocating for cutting and gutting Social Security, Joe Biden, straight face, went out and said they doctored the video. What? This is really stunning. And you know I follow politics. I see politicians lie all the time. But to just outright say a video and audio of me saying this thing is doctored with no evidence at all is kind of mind-blowing. And to make matters worse, it's not even just Joe Biden and the people on his payroll who have gone all in on this lie. Basically, the entire mainstream media has unanimously agreed that Joe Biden is telling the truth here, and Sanders' team is pushing a doctored video of Joe Biden advocating for Social Security cuts. Again, despite the fact that all the evidence points to the contrary, that Joe Biden did actually advocate for those cuts. And I would love to hear the rationalization from the mainstream media as to why they believe Joe Biden over Bernie Sanders, even though all the context and relevant information points to Joe Biden just being a brazen liar. Because if you remember, just a couple days ago, when it was Elizabeth Warren just outright brazenly, cravenly lying about Bernie Sanders, a huge chunk of the mainstream media went all in and said they were just going to believe Elizabeth Warren no matter what, because a woman said it and we believe women. A disgusting, disingenuous distortion of what that phrase actually means. I wonder what the excuse is going to be for Joe Biden. What? We believe old white men who have a history of being flagrantly dishonest, as well as being in the pocket of the very same people who want to privatize and cut Social Security and who would benefit from that financially. We believe them. Is that the excuse that they're going to use to believe in Joe Biden over Bernie Sanders? But I will do an entirely separate video about the mainstream media aiding and abetting in this disgusting lie by Joe Biden. It's clear that Joe Biden is lying about this because he knows, especially in a Democratic primary, but really in any election, in a general election too, if you are full-throatedly talking about cutting Social Security, that is not a popular position. That is an untenable position because the program that is one of the most successful government programs in the history of the country. Before Social Security was passed in 1935, the rate of elderly people who were in poverty was 50%. 50% of elderly people in the United States were living in poverty. These people could not afford to buy their own food. They could not afford their own medical treatment. They couldn't afford to, really, a lot of them couldn't even afford to live on their own. A lot of them had to live with their children and their grandchildren. The situation was dire for them. A lot of them ended up dying as a result of the poverty. So they were working their entire lives, just barely getting by. The only retirement savings that they had was the little money that they put together for themselves and kept in their savings account. And then after the Great Depression, all that money is gone. So these people are now elderly, they can't work, and a lot of them were just shit out of luck. And that had reverberating consequences throughout the economy and throughout society. After Social Security passed, it drastically cut the amount of elderly people in the United States who were living in poverty. And it lifted that financial burden off of their families. So the program has been incredibly effective to this day, and which is why it is so overwhelmingly popular, even among the Republican voters, definitely among Democratic voters. Joe Biden knows this, and instead of just saying, wow, Social Security is an incredibly popular program, I'm going to do everything I can to not only protect it, but strengthen it and grow it further. Instead of doing that, his position is, we're going to lie to everybody and pretend like we're on their side about the Social Security thing. But really, behind the scenes, like I've been doing for the last 40 years, I'm going to do everything in my power to gut the program and try to privatize it as much of it as possible. Even though it would certainly make living conditions worse for millions of Americans. So it's just a dishonest attempt to try to pull one over on the voters, to try to gaslight people into thinking you're actually on their side, but really you're doing nothing more but trying to undermine all their priorities behind their backs. And it's so ironic because a lot of these corporate Democrats, these establishment Democrats in the mainstream media, what is the main thing that one of the main things that they try to hit Trump on every single day? He's a fucking liar. He's a flagrant, brazen, unrepentant liar. That's where all this obsession with all these fact checks, oh, Trump told 7,687 lies since he's come into office. Or, oh, fact check, Trump said this in a speech, but it turns out that's not actually correct. That's where this whole obsession with that comes from, because they think that's one of the strongest points that they can hit Trump on. And implicit in that argument is Trump's a liar, the Republicans are liars, but you could trust the Democrats because they're telling you the truth and they're honest and they're really on your side. And like I said, it's ironic because the Democrats, as well as the mainstream media, they're also brazen, unrepentant liars. Which brings me to the last point I want to make about this. This entire situation, and Joe Biden himself, is the perfect example of why this nonsense of I'm going to vote for the Democratic nominee no matter who it is makes absolutely no sense. Like I said, one of their main arguments against Trump is he's a flagrant liar, disingenuous. You can't believe a word that comes out of his mouth. And how can you have a president of the United States if you can't believe anything that he says? That's one of their main arguments that they like to make. Okay, if that's true, how can you vote for a Democrat who's a brazen liar, flagrant liar, unrepentant liar, and you can't believe a word that comes out of his fucking mouth either? That's two sides of the same coin. If Joe Biden is willing to lie to you about gutting Social Security, one of the most important programs in the country, what wouldn't he lie to you about? But just beyond the lying and the character analysis you could make off of that, on the policy, voting blue no matter who still makes no goddamn sense because the Republicans want to gut Social Security and Medicare and privatize them. And Democrats, corporate Democrats, establishment Democrats who are in the pocket of financial institutions, just like the Republicans, also want to cut, gut, and privatize Social Security. So what's the difference here? What's the difference? One of them has a D by the name, the other one has a R. And I'm not saying they're exactly the same on everything, but the point I'm making is there isn't enough of a difference for me to choose one of them over the other one, to support one of them over the other one, to cast my vote for one of them over the other one. You go down the list of issues, there is barely any daylight between them. On healthcare, we have the amount of people who are uninsured and underinsured is around 100 million people in this country. These people cannot afford the basic necessary healthcare that they need. 40,000 people every single year die because they can't afford to go to the doctor. That's more than any war zone in the world. But every year, that amount of people die in the United States, the richest country in the world, because they cannot afford to go to the doctor to address basic healthcare concerns. Knowing that, you have the corrupt-ass Republicans who will block the only solution to that problem, which is Medicare for all, at all costs. And you also have the corporate Democrats who will block the only solution that we have, a single-payer Medicare healthcare system, at every turn and at any cost, just as much as the Republicans. On the environment and fighting climate change, we all know the Republicans are fucking in the pocket of the energy industry, and they are 100% opposed to doing anything to address this climate crisis. We know that. That's true. But you know what? Under Democratic administration, under the very same administration that Joe Biden was vice president in, the U.S. produced more oil than under any other administration in the history of the country. We dug up more oil in the United States than at any other time in the history of the country. We were still building pipelines. You had the whole Dakota Access Pipeline situation. You had Obama for his entire presidency up until the last year or two of his administration. He was weighing whether or not he was going to approve the Keystone XL pipeline, which would have been disastrous for the climate and the environment. You also have, more than just the climate, but let's also talk about the environment. We had a water contamination crisis under the Barack Obama administration, a Democratic administration who had control of the House and the Senate, and they did nothing to address it. They did not invest the trillions of dollars needed into upgrading our infrastructure, including our water systems in this country. You had Flint, Michigan. That crisis happened under the Obama administration. And instead of investing however much money was necessary to fix the crisis, I believe it was $1 billion around there. Obama went there, handed out water filters that did not filter out lead and the other contaminants in the water. And then he tried to gaslight the people in Flint by pretending to drink a cup of the water and say, oh, everything's fine here. Go on about your merry way. There's nothing to see here. Could drink the water. Everything's all fine. Even though those very same people were dying. Their family members have died because of that water. That's what a Democrat did. Of course, Trump is now the president, and the Republicans aren't going to do anything to fix this crisis. But do you think Joe Biden is going to come in and rip up all the pipes in Flint, Michigan? And as well as there was a report, I believe it was Reuters that put out this report, that there were 3,000 other cities in this country that had lead contamination even higher than Flint, Michigan. Is Joe Biden going to do anything about that? No, I don't think so. So, and we could talk about foreign policy. Neocons in both parties. Joe Biden, one of the worst neocons. Started the Iraq, was all in on the Iraq war, Afghanistan war, lied about it the entire time, as the Afghanistan paper showed us. Joe Biden, all in on the coup in Libya to overthrow Gaddafi, and how did that turn out? Joe Biden, incredibly hawkish everywhere in the world, Syria. He was supporting the genocide in Yemen. So what? I'm going to vote for Joe Biden over Trump because what? On foreign policy, he says nicer things he gives nicer speeches, and he talks nicer to our allies. There is no daylight between them there. And one of the favorite excuses of the people who want to try to browbeat and shame people into voting for the Democratic nominee, whoever it is, one of their favorite tools that they have is, oh, well, Trump's incredibly racist. You know what? Joe Biden is incredibly racist. And if I'm being honest, I think Joe Biden, purely by his record, not the rhetoric that he's using right now at this moment, purely by his policy record and the things that he said in his past, you could make the argument that Joe Biden is even more racist than Donald Trump. For all the things that Donald Trump has said, the shithole country remarks, the Muslim ban, the crackdown on the border and demonizing immigrants from Mexico and other Latin American countries and South American countries, Joe Biden has a record that could go toe-to-toe with Trump on that. Because, yeah, Trump came out and called Mexicans murderers and rapists, and he conflates them with MS-13 and calls them drug dealers and all those things. Yeah, he did that. But you know who else also did that? Joe Biden did that. Joe Biden did that on the floor of the Senate multiple times, pushing that tough on crime bullshit back when he was trying to push his horrendous crime bill that specifically targeted minorities in this country. Joe Biden's crime bill, Joe Biden was out there calling people super predators and calling black people and demonizing black people, acting like they're the source of crime and violent crime and the drug problem. He was doing all of that. And the legislation that he was pushing fueled this mass incarceration crisis and the militarized police that we have in this country that are targeting minorities like myself. Joe Biden put the disparity between crack cocaine and powder cocaine in that crime bill, even though it's the same substance, but rich white people use one and poor black people use the other one. So if you're a poor black person using crack, you get 4 times the sentence of a rich white person using cocaine on Wall Street. You want to talk about the impact that he had on the African American community? It is, and other minorities, it is way worse than any rhetoric any racist can use. Because, again, like I said, you ruin the lives of millions of people and their families, locking them up for bullshit. And then you also spurred the mass incarceration crisis and allowed and gave way for the private prison industrial complex in this country. Joe Biden's bankruptcy bill also hurt the minority community badly. There was already a gigantic wealth inequality between whites and black in this country, and his shitty bankruptcy bill made it even worse. So Joe Biden, his entire career, he was tough on crime, demonizing black people. Then he passes legislation to make the lives of black people even worse and continue systemic racism that's targeted minorities in this country. So, yeah, Donald Trump says a lot of stupid and racist shit, but his record on race and policies that affect minority, Joe Biden is way worse by a fucking mile. So again, the point I was trying to make with all of this is a perfect example of why this whole I'm a vote for the Democratic nominee, even if it's Joe Biden, makes absolutely no sense. Bitch, it's Bernie or a bust. That's the end of the discussion. Bernie Sanders is the only thing that's really different because you know what? I cannot bring myself to vote for a war criminal. I cannot bring myself to vote for a racist who has devastated the minority community, devastated people who look like me, who has had his policy has had a direct impact on my life. I cannot vote for someone like that. I cannot vote for someone who is going to fight against Medicare for all, tooth and nail. I cannot vote for someone who I know is going to gut and privatize Social Security the first chance he gets. So anybody who is still pushing this vote blue no matter who, you can take that and you can go somewhere with that shit.